The worn fabric of her mother's wedding dress hung loose on Emma's thin frame, yellowed lace catching on calloused fingers as she tried to smooth the wrinkles. The small church in Dust Hollow, Texas, smelled of old wood and whiskey, the latter courtesy of the handful of men who'd stumbled in to witness what they called Old Tom Mercer's bargain bride. Emma stood before the altar, 17 years old, with eyes that belonged to someone who'd lived twice as long. Her father, Samuel Clayton, swayed slightly in the front pew, his bloodshot eyes fixed on the back of her head with the satisfied look of a man who'd just settled his debts. 3 months of gambling losses wiped clean with one signature on a marriage certificate. "You clean up nice enough," he'd slurred that morning, watching her struggle with the buttons. "Mercer's getting his money's worth." The words still burned in her chest, but Emma had learned long ago that tears were a luxury she couldn't afford. Her mother's dress, the only thing of value Sarah Clayton had left behind when consumption took her 5 years ago, felt like wearing a ghost. Emma wondered if her mother had stood at this same altar 20 years prior, young and frightened, marrying a man who'd promised her the world and delivered only bruises and broken bottles. Thomas Mercer stood beside her now, a giant of a man at 45, his weathered face carved by sun and wind into something that might have been handsome once. He owned the largest cattle ranch for 50 miles in any direction, employed half the men in town, and had buried a wife named Clara 10 years back. The townspeople whispered about her death. Some said fever. Others said she'd simply stopped eating until she faded away like smoke. The preacher, Reverend Whitfield, cleared his throat nervously. His wife sat in the third row, lips pursed in disapproval, though whether at the bride's youth or the groom's age, Emma couldn't tell. Perhaps both. "Dearly beloved," Whitfield began, his voice echoing in the nearly empty church. "We gather here today to witness the union of Thomas Mercer and Emma Clayton." Emma's fingers found the small tear in the dress's hem, worrying at it like a child might worry at a loose tooth. 20 people had come to watch, mostly men from Mercer's ranch, their face sun-darkened and unreadable. The women who'd attended looked at her with pity, barely concealed behind paper fans, whispering behind gloved hands about that poor Clayton girl and what a shame and, but what choice did she have? No choice at all, Emma thought, her jaw clenching. When your father owed a man more than he could pay, and that man offered to take a daughter instead of calling in the debt with violence. What choice existed? She'd seen what happened to families when debts went unpaid in Dust Hollow. The Hendersons had lost their homestead last winter, their 3 children scattered to relatives back east, at least this way. Her younger sister Mary would keep a roof over her head, even if it leaked and creaked in the wind. "Do you, Thomas Mercer, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Mercer's voice rumbled like distant thunder. "I do." Emma studied him from the corner of her eye. He hadn't touched her since arriving at their ramshackle house 3 days ago to finalize the arrangement. He'd sat at their rickety table, large hands folded, and spoken only to her father. Emma had served coffee in cracked cups, listening to them discuss her like livestock at auction. $200 of debt, erased. 1 daughter, transferred like a deed of property. "Do you, Emma Clayton, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" The church fell silent. Emma could hear her own heartbeat, could feel every eye upon her. Her father shifted in his seat, boot scraping against wood. A warning. She'd seen him make that same movement before his fist flew. Emma's voice came out as barely a whisper. She cleared her throat, lifted her chin. Whatever else she was, she would not be a coward. "I do." Mercer turned to look at her then, and she saw something flicker in his dark eyes. Not desire, not triumph, but something else. Something that looked almost like regret. It vanished before she could be certain, replaced by his usual stone-faced expression. "The ring," Whitfield prompted. Mercer produced a simple gold band, worn smooth by its previous owner. Clara's ring. Emma realized with a jolt. She wondered if the dead woman's ghost watched from the church rafters, if she pitied or envied the girl taking her place. The metal was warm against Emma's cold finger, heavier than she'd expected. Her mother's ring had been sold years ago for food, but she remembered its weight, remembered her mother twisting it endlessly in the months before she died. "I now pronounce you man and wife. You may kiss the bride." Mercer leaned down. He had to bend considerably to reach her, and pressed dry lips briefly against hers. It was the first time he'd touched her, and Emma forced herself not to flinch. His beard scratched her chin, and he smelled of leather and horses and something else, something clean like soap. Then it was over, and he was stepping back, offering his arm. Emma took it because the alternative was to run, and there was nowhere to run to. They walked down the aisle together, past the pitying faces and knowing smirks, past her father who was already eyeing the saloon across the street, out into the harsh Texas sun. 3 wagons waited outside, Mercer's men ready to escort them back to the Double M Ranch. Emma had never been there, had only heard stories of its vast acreage, its hundreds of head of cattle, its big house with real glass windows and wooden floors, a palace compared to the 2-room shack where she'd spent her 17 years. "Your things?" Mercer asked, speaking directly to her for the first time. "There." Emma nodded toward a single carpet bag by the church steps. Everything she owned in the world. Mostly her mother's old clothes cut down to fit and her grandmother's Bible with half its pages missing. One of the ranch hands, a young man with kind eyes, jumped down to fetch it. Emma heard him mutter something about shameful business under his breath, but Mercer's sharp look silenced him. As they prepared to leave, Emma caught sight of Mary peering around the corner of Fletcher's General Store, 13 years old and already pretty enough to draw notice. With their mother's golden hair and delicate features, Emma had fought this marriage until her father threatened to offer Mary instead. "Mercer don't care which daughter clears the debt," he'd said, whiskey thick on his breath, "and the younger one might fetch a bonus." Emma raised her hand slightly. A goodbye. A promise. Mary's face crumpled, but she waved back before disappearing into the shadows between buildings. They'd said their real goodbyes that morning. Emma pressing her mother's handkerchief into Mary's hands, making her promise to hide it where their father wouldn't find it to sell. "Ready, Mrs. Mercer?" Her new husband's voice held no emotion. Mrs. Mercer. The name felt foreign on her tongue, like trying on a dress made for someone else. But then, wasn't that exactly what she'd done? "Yes," Emma said, climbing into the wagon with as much dignity as she could muster in the overlarge dress. She would not cry. She would not give the watching townspeople the satisfaction of seeing her break, whatever awaited her at the Double M Ranch. Whatever kind of man Thomas Mercer truly was behind his stone face and careful distance, she would meet it with her chin high and her back straight. As the wagon rolled out of Dust Hollow, Emma didn't look back, but her hands, hidden in the folds of yellowed lace, clenched into fists so tight her nails drew blood from her palms. The sun beat down mercilessly, and dust rose from the wheels to coat everything in a fine layer of grit. Beside her, Mercer rode in silence, his presence as solid and unreadable as the red rocks that dotted the landscape. Emma stole glances at his profile, the strong jaw, the lines around his eyes that spoke of years squinting into the sun, the gray threading through dark hair. He could be cruel or kind. She realized. She had no way of knowing which until they were alone, until the door closed behind them and the real marriage began. But something in her, some small, stubborn flame that her father's fists had never quite managed to extinguish, refused to be afraid. She had survived 17 years of Samuel Clayton's temper. She had watched her mother waste away and still managed to raise Mary, to protect her as best she could. She had stood at that altar and spoken her vows with steady voice despite every instinct screaming at her to run. The wedding band caught the light as the wagon swayed, and Emma stared at it. This small circle that marked her as property transferred from one man to another. But property could be more than passive chattel. She thought, Even cattle could kick, could refuse to be herded, could break free if the fence proved weak enough. The Double M Ranch appeared on the horizon like a small town unto itself. Barns and bunkhouses, corrals and workshops, and rising above it all, a 2-story house with a wide porch and windows that gleamed like watching eyes. Emma straightened her spine, lifted her chin, and prepared to meet whatever came next. She was Emma Mercer now, for better or worse, but underneath the borrowed dress and the handed-down ring, she was still Emma Clayton, the girl who'd learned to take a punch without crying, to stretch a handful of flour into a meal, to find strength in the spaces between heartbeats. And that girl, she thought as the wagon rolled through the ranch gates, was harder to break than any man might think. The house was even larger up close, its wooden walls painted white and kept pristine despite the constant assault of Texas dust. Emma followed Thomas through the front door, her worn boots clicking against polished floors that reflected the late afternoon light. The entrance hall alone was bigger than her father's entire shack. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Thomas called, and a woman emerged from what Emma assumed was the kitchen, sturdy, graying, with keen dark eyes that took in Emma's borrowed dress and young face in one swift glance. "Senor Mercer," she replied, wiping flour-dusted hands on her apron. "The house is ready." Thomas nodded. "This is Emma, my wife." The words came out flat, functional. "Emma, this is Lucia Rodriguez. She manages the household." Lucia's expression softened slightly. "Welcome, Senora. You must be tired from the journey." Emma wasn't sure how to respond to kindness. It felt like a test she might fail. "Thank you," she managed. "I'll be in my study." Thomas said, "Show her to her room." Her room, not their room. Emma felt a mixture of relief and confusion as Lucia led her up a staircase that didn't creak under their weight. "This way, Senora," Lucia said, opening a door at the end of the hallway. "Senor Mercer thought you might prefer the east room. It catches the morning sun." The room took Emma's breath away. A real bed with an iron frame and clean quilts, a dresser with a mirror, a washstand with a porcelain basin, windows with curtains, actual curtains, not flour sacks tacked over holes in the wall, and on the small table beside the bed, a stack of books. Emma approached them slowly, as if they might disappear. Her mother had taught her to read before she died, using the Bible and old newspapers. But books, real books, had been as foreign to her life as silk dresses. "Senor Mercer sent to San Antonio for these," Lucia said quietly. "He wasn't sure what you might like." Emma picked up the top volume with trembling hands. Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. Below it, Pride and Prejudice, Little Women, Wuthering Heights. Stories about women, she realized. Stories about women who faced difficult circumstances and survived them. "The señor's room is across the hall," Lucia continued. He is a private man. He takes breakfast at dawn, before the hands start work. Lunch he often skips. Dinner is at 6. Am I to eat with him?" "If you wish. He said you should do as you please." Lucia paused at the door. "There are dresses in the wardrobe. They should fit well enough until we can have new ones made. The necessary room is at the end of the hall. I'll have hot water brought up for washing." Then she was gone, and Emma stood alone in this room that was now hers. She sat on the edge of the bed, a real bed with a real mattress, not a straw tick on the floor, and tried to make sense of it all. Thomas Mercer had not touched her, had given her a private room, had bought her books. Emma had prepared herself for many things: roughness, demands, the casual cruelty she'd seen in her father and his drinking companions. She had not prepared for distance, for courtesy, for books left like offerings at a shrine. She stayed in the room through dinner that first night, too overwhelmed to face him across a table. Lucia brought up a tray, beef stew with vegetables Emma had only dreamed of affording, bread that wasn't stale, butter, real butter. Emma ate slowly, savoring each bite, half expecting someone to snatch it away. Later, she heard music drifting up from somewhere below, guitar strings being plucked with skilled fingers, a melody that spoke of loneliness and vast spaces. Emma crept to her door, opening it a crack. The music came from the parlor, she thought, but she couldn't bring herself to investigate. Instead, she returned to bed and picked up Jane Eyre, reading by lamplight until her eyes grew heavy. The next morning, she woke to find another book outside her door. The Scarlet Letter, with a note in precise handwriting, Mrs. Rodriguez says you were reading late. Thought you might need another T.M. Emma held the note for a long time, studying those initials. Her husband had noticed her light on, had thought of her, had climbed the stairs to leave a book like some might leave flowers. Days passed in this strange pattern. Emma would wake to find a new book. She'd spend mornings exploring the house and grounds, afternoons reading, evenings listening to that lonely guitar. She took some meals with Thomas, sitting at opposite ends of a table meant for 12, exchanging polite comments about the weather or the ranch operations. He never asked about her past, never mentioned their wedding night or made any move toward her room. On the 5th day, emboldened by a particularly moving chapter of Jane Eyre, Emma ventured to the study where Thomas spent his evenings. She knocked softly. "Come in." He sat behind a massive desk, ledgers spread before him, but it was the guitar propped in the corner that drew her eye. "Do you play every night?" she asked. He looked surprised that she'd spoken beyond pleasantries. "Most nights. Does it disturb you?" "No, it's beautiful. Sad, but beautiful." "My wife taught me," he said, then stopped abruptly, as if the words had escaped without permission. "Clara." His eyes sharpened. "You know about Clara?" "People talk." "Yes," he said slowly. "They do." He turned back to his ledgers. "Was there something you needed?" Emma wanted to ask about the woman whose clothes she wore, whose ring circled her finger, whose absence seemed to permeate the house like smoke. Instead, she said, "I wanted to thank you. For the books, for everything." He looked up again, and in the lamplight, she could see the full weight of whatever he carried. "You don't need to thank me for basic decency, Emma. In my experience," she said quietly, "basic decency is rare enough to warrant thanks." Something shifted in his expression. "How old are you, truly?" 17, 18 come September." "Christ," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "When Clayton said his daughter, I assumed that I'd be older. Old enough to have chosen this, at least." He stood abruptly, moving to the window. "I won't touch you. I want to be clear about that. This arrangement, it's legal. But that doesn't make it right. You'll have everything you need here. Food, shelter, books, whatever you wish. But I won't. You're safe here." Emma felt something unknot in her chest that she hadn't realized was twisted. "Why did you agree to it, then, the marriage?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Your father owed me more than money. 3 months ago, he got drunk and picked a fight with one of my men. Miguel has 5 children and a bad leg from being trampled by a horse. Your father broke his arm so badly he'll never have full use of it again. I could have had him arrested, sent to prison. Instead, you took me as payment." The words tasted bitter. "I took the debt as canceled and you out of that house." He turned to face her. "I've seen the bruises. Emma, old ones under new ones. I know what kind of man Samuel Clayton is." Emma's hand went unconsciously to her ribs, where the latest marks were still fading to yellow. "So you bought me out of pity. Would you prefer I'd left you there?" She had no answer for that. "Read whatever you like," he said, gesturing to the shelves that lined the walls. "The library is yours as much as mine. And Emma, you don't have to hide in your room. This is your home now, such as it is." Emma left the study feeling more confused than when she'd entered. That night, she sat at dinner with him, and they discussed Jane Eyre. He'd read it years ago, remembered it well. He spoke to her like an equal, asking her thoughts on Jane's choices, on Rochester's secrets, on the nature of independence. Later, she heard the guitar again, but this time she recognized the sadness for what it was. Not self-pity, but grief, bone deep and permanent. She wondered if Clara had sat where Emma now sat, if she'd loved the music or merely tolerated it, if she'd been happy in this beautiful prison of a house. The next morning, there was no book at her door. Instead, she found a note. "The library is downstairs. Second door on the left. Help yourself. T.M." Emma spent the day among more books than she'd known existed, running her fingers along leather spines, breathing in the smell of paper and binding glue. She chose carefully. Dickens, Austen, one of Mr. Emerson's essay collections that made her feel smart just holding it. That evening at dinner, Thomas said, "Mrs. Rodriguez tells me you can sew." "Yes, my mother taught me." "Would you be willing to help with the household mending? The men are hard on their clothes, and Lucia's eyes aren't what they were. You'd be paid, of course. Wages, not charity." Emma set down her fork. "You want to pay your wife to do mending?" "I want to pay someone who can sew to help with necessary work. The fact that you're my wife is incidental." It was an odd thing, being married to a man who seemed determined to treat the marriage as a business arrangement beneficial to both parties. But it was better, so much better than what she'd feared. "All right," Emma said. "I'll help with the mending." And so a routine developed. Books in the morning, mending in the afternoon, sitting with Lucia, who told stories of her childhood in Mexico and taught Emma Spanish words. Dinner with Thomas, where they discussed literature and philosophy and carefully avoided anything personal. Evening guitar that no longer sounded quite so lonely now that Emma knew someone listened. On her 10th night at the Double M Ranch, Emma found herself at Thomas's study door again. This time, she didn't knock. "Would you teach me?" she asked, nodding toward the guitar. He looked up from his ledgers. Surprised. "You want to learn?" "I want to make something beautiful," she said simply. "I've spent so long just surviving. I'd like to do more than that." Thomas studied her for a long moment, then reached for the guitar. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his. "We'll start with the basics. Put your fingers here." And as he showed her how to hold the instrument, how to press the strings just so, Emma thought that perhaps this strange, quiet marriage might offer something she'd never dared hope for. Not love, perhaps, but space. Space to read, to learn, to become more than Samuel Clayton's daughter or Thomas Mercer's bought bride. Space to discover who Emma truly was when no one was trying to break her. 3 weeks into her strange new life, Emma found herself watching Thomas from the kitchen window as he worked alongside his men, mending a fence line. He'd removed his jacket in the morning heat, sleeves rolled up, hands sure and steady as he hammered posts into the hard earth. There was no separation between owner and worker here. He labored as hard as any hired hand, harder perhaps, as if trying to exhaust something that lived beneath his skin. "He wasn't always so distant," Lucia said softly, joining Emma at the window. "Before Clara." Emma turned from the window, abandoning the shirt she'd been mending. "What was she like?" Lucia hesitated, then sat heavily in her chair. "Young, beautiful, fragile as spun glass." She picked up her own sewing, fingers working automatically. "Senor Mercer brought her here as a bride 15 years ago. She was 18, from a good family in Virginia. Used to parties and silk dresses and servants who called her Miss. She wasn't happy here. She tried. Lord knows she tried. But this land," Lucia gestured toward the window, where dust devils danced across the yard. "This land breaks soft things. Clara was meant for drawing rooms and garden parties, not cattle drives and drought seasons." Emma thought of her mother, coughing blood into handkerchiefs while trying to stretch beans and cornmeal into meals for 3. Sometimes the drawing rooms break you just as surely as the frontier. Lucia gave her a sharp look. Perhaps you're right, Senora. Perhaps that's why you're still standing while Clara... She shook her head. I shouldn't speak of the dead. But Emma needed to understand the ghost that haunted her marriage. Please, I wear her clothes, her ring. I live in her house. I should at least know her story. She took ill, Lucia said finally, but not with any sickness I could name. She just faded, stopped eating, stopped speaking, spent her days at that piano in the parlor, playing the same sad songs over and over. Senor Mercer brought doctors from San Antonio, even one from Dallas. They said melancholia, said she needed rest. But how do you rest from your own mind? Emma felt a chill despite the warm morning. And Thomas watched her disappear piece by piece. Tried everything. Gifts, trips to town, new dresses, even offered to send her back to Virginia. But she wouldn't go. Said she'd made her vows. Then one morning, she didn't wake up. The doctor said her heart gave out, but I think she just decided to stop living. They sat in silence, needles flashing in the sunlight. Emma understood now why Thomas kept his distance, why he'd given her a separate room, why he spoke to her with such careful courtesy. He'd watched one young bride wither in this house. He wouldn't risk watching another. That evening, Emma found herself drawn to the parlor she'd previously avoided. The piano sat in the corner like a sleeping beast, its polished surface reflecting the lamplight. Sheet music still rested on the stand. Chopin. She saw melancholy indeed. Do you play? Thomas's voice from the doorway made her jump. No, we could never afford. My mother sang, though, hymns mostly. He entered the room slowly, as if it pained him. Clara played beautifully, for hours sometimes. Near the end, it was the only time she seemed... He trailed off. Alive, Emma supplied gently. Present, he corrected. She was alive, just elsewhere. Emma traced a finger along the piano's edge. Were you happy together before? Thomas moved to the window, hands clasped behind his back. I thought we were, but looking back, I think I was happy at the idea of her, this beautiful, cultured woman choosing to make a life with me. I never asked if she was choosing or just following the path laid out for her. Most women don't get to choose, Emma said, thinking of her own wedding day. No, he agreed quietly. They don't, which is why... He turned to face her. Emma, I need you to understand. You're not a prisoner here. If you want to leave, to start fresh somewhere else, I'll help you. Money, references, whatever you need. Emma stared at him. You'd let me go just like that? I'd help you go, if that's what you wanted. There are cities where a woman can make her own way. Chicago, San Francisco. You're smart, capable. You could build a life that belongs only to you. And the marriage would remain legal, protecting you from other entanglements. Or we could arrange a quiet divorce, if you preferred. I have lawyers who could manage it discreetly. Emma sank onto the piano bench, overwhelmed. No one had ever offered her freedom before. Choices had been something that happened to other people, people with money and power and names that meant something. She'd expected to trade one cage for another, hopefully a more comfortable one. She hadn't expected the door to be held open. Why? She asked finally. Thomas smiled sadly. Because I've learned the difference between keeping someone and having them choose to stay. That night, Emma lay in her soft bed, staring at the ceiling. She could leave, pack her few belongings, take the money Thomas offered, board a train to somewhere no one knew her name, become a seamstress, perhaps, or a shop girl, live in a boarding house with other working women, wake each day belonging to no one but herself. The thought terrified her as much as it thrilled her. Over the following days, she found herself studying Thomas with new eyes, She noticed how he knew every ranch hand by name, asked after their families, their troubles, how he ate the same simple food as his workers, no special treats for the boss, how he spent long hours over his account books, not to count profits, but to ensure fair wages were paid on time. She watched him with the horses, gentle despite his size, speaking to them in low tones as he checked hooves and mended tack. She saw him teaching young Billy Martinez to read during lunch breaks, patient with the boy's stumbling efforts. She observed the respect in his foreman's eyes, earned not through fear, but through shared sweat and mutual regard. "He's a good man," she said to Lucia one afternoon. "One of the best I've known." Lucia agreed, which makes what happened with Clara all the harder. He blamed himself, still does. Emma thought about that as she walked the ranch grounds that evening. The sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, and she could hear cattle lowing in the distance. It was beautiful in its way, this harsh land that demanded strength. Not the manicured beauty Clara must have known in Virginia, but something raw and honest. She found Thomas in the stable, brushing down his horse after a long day. He looked up as she approached, surprise flickering across his features. "I've been thinking about your offer," she said without preamble. He stilled, brush suspended in midair. "And I want to ask you something first. If I stay, not as your wife, but as what? Your housekeeper, your charitable project?" "As yourself," he said simply. "Emma, whatever that means to you. And if what it means changes, if someday I decide I want more." He resumed brushing, slow, steady strokes. "Then we'd discuss it, like equals, like partners." "Partners," Emma repeated, testing the word. "I've never been anyone's partner." "Neither have I," Thomas admitted. "I thought I had been, but I think I was more like a director, arranging scenes I thought would make Clara happy instead of asking what happiness meant to her." Emma moved closer, running her hand along the horse's neck. The animal whickered softly, accepting her touch. "I don't know what happiness means to me either. I've spent so long just trying to survive." "Then maybe that's where we start, figuring it out." They stood in comfortable silence, the only sound the brush against horsehair and the settling of animals for the night. Emma felt something easing in her chest, a knot she'd carried so long she'd forgotten it wasn't supposed to be there. "I'd like to learn to ride," she said suddenly. Would that be acceptable?" Thomas's face lit up with the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. "I'll teach you myself. We'll start tomorrow if you'd like." "I'd like that," Emma said, then, gathering her courage. "I'm staying, Thomas, not because I have nowhere else to go, but because here feels like somewhere I could become who I'm supposed to be. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," he said softly. "And Emma, thank you for giving this place, giving me, a chance." As she walked back to the house, Emma felt the weight of Clara's ring on her finger. But for the first time, it didn't feel like a shackle. It felt like a reminder that she had choices now, that she could stay or go, that she could be Emma who read books and learned guitar and would soon learn to ride across the Texas plains with the wind in her hair. That night, when Thomas played his guitar, Emma crept down to sit outside the study door, listening. The melody was different, still touched with sadness, but with something else woven through, hope, perhaps, or just the possibility of it. When the music stopped, she heard his voice, quiet but clear. "I know you're there. Emma, you're welcome to come in." She pushed open the door, finding him smiling slightly. "How did you know?" "The floorboard outside creaks. Clara used to—" He stopped, shook his head. "Would you like to practice your getting better at the C chord?" Emma settled into what was becoming her chair, accepting the guitar. As she fumbled through the fingering he'd taught her, she realized something. She wasn't trying to replace Clara or compete with her ghost. She was simply Emma, learning to make music in a house that had heard too much silence. And that, perhaps, was exactly what they both needed. The morning sun cast long shadows across the dirt road as Thomas saddled 2 horses in the stable yard. Emma stood nearby, wearing a split skirt Lucia had altered from some of Clara's riding clothes, trying to calm the nervous flutter in her stomach. She'd been at the ranch for nearly 2 months now, but this felt different somehow, more significant. "This is Buttercup," Thomas said, leading forward a gentle-looking mare with a golden coat. "She's patient with beginners, taught half the county to ride over the years." Emma approached slowly, letting the horse smell her hand before stroking her neck. "She's beautiful." "And forgiving," Thomas added with a slight smile, "which matters more when you're learning." He showed her how to mount, where to place her feet, how to hold the reins. His hands were careful and respectful as he adjusted her posture, touching only when necessary, and always with a murmured request for permission. It was a far cry from her father's rough handling, and Emma found herself relaxing under his patient instruction. They walked the horses at first, staying within sight of the ranch buildings. Emma felt awkward and too high up, certain she'd fall at any moment. But Thomas rode beside her, voice calm and encouraging, until she began to find her rhythm. "You're a natural," he said as they paused by a small creek to let the horses drink. "I feel like a sack of potatoes bouncing around up here." "Everyone does at first, but you've got good instincts. You're not fighting the horse." They dismounted to stretch their legs, and Emma found herself studying the landscape with new eyes. From horseback, the ranch seemed even vaster, the possibilities endless. "I've been thinking," she said, surprising herself, "about what you said, about choices." Thomas waited, not pushing. "All my life, people have decided things for me, where I'd live, what I'd wear, who I'd marry. Even kindness, like yours, is still someone else deciding what's best for me." "You're right," he said simply. "What would you prefer?" Emma picked up a smooth stone, turning it over in her hands. "I want to decide something, really decide it, not just react to what others have chosen." "Such as—" She took a breath. "There's a crossroads about 3 miles north of here." "Isn't there where the road splits between going back to Dust Hollow and continuing to the ranch?" Thomas nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "I want to go there," Emma said. "Just me. I want to sit at that crossroads and choose which direction to take. Not because anyone's forcing me or offering me something, but because I decide." "When?" "Now. Today." Thomas looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Buttercup knows the way. She'll take care of you." "You're not going to argue. Tell me it's dangerous for a woman alone." "Would it change your mind if I did?" Emma smiled, the first real smile she'd given him. "No." "Then I'll tell you instead to take the canteen and stay on the main road. Buttercup will bring you home when you're ready." Home. The word sat strangely in her chest as Emma mounted again, this time without help. She looked down at Thomas, who stood with his hat in his hands, expression unreadable. "I might choose to leave," she said quietly. "I know. You won't follow me. Not unless you ask me to." Emma nudged Buttercup forward, heart pounding. The mare moved into an easy walk, seeming to understand her inexperienced rider needed gentleness. As the ranch buildings fell behind, Emma felt a wild surge of something she couldn't name. Freedom, perhaps, though that word seemed too small for the feeling. The road stretched before her, dusty and rutted from wagon wheels. She passed a group of ranch hands moving cattle, who tipped their hats respectfully. "Morning, Mrs. Mercer," they called, and she raised her hand in response, marveling at how normal this felt, how possible. The crossroads appeared sooner than expected, marked by a weathered wooden sign. One arrow pointed back toward Dust Hollow, the other deeper into ranch land. Emma dismounted carefully, legs shaky from the ride, and led Buttercup to the shade of a scraggly mesquite tree. She sat in the dirt, not caring about her skirts, and stared at those two directions, back or forward, the life she'd known or the life she was still discovering. Dust Hollow meant her father, his debts, his fists. It meant Mary, sweet Mary who deserved better than their broken-down shack and empty bellies. It meant familiarity, even if that familiarity was edged with pain. The ranch meant Thomas, complicated and grieving and unexpectedly kind. It meant books and guitar lessons and Lucia's patient teaching. It meant sleeping in a bed that didn't sag, eating food that filled her belly, wearing clothes that weren't patched and repatched. But it also meant being Mrs. Mercer, wearing a dead woman's ring, living a life that wasn't quite hers. Emma pulled her knees to her chest, making herself small against the vastness of the choice. A hawk circled overhead, riding thermals with effortless grace, free to go wherever the wind took it. But even hawks had nests, she thought, places they returned to. She thought about Thomas's offer to help her leave, to start fresh in some city where no one knew her story. The idea still tempted, to be just Emma, not anyone's daughter or wife or burden, to earn her own money, make her own decisions, answer to no one but herself. Yet when she tried to picture that life, it felt hollow somehow. Anonymous rooms in anonymous buildings, days spent bent over sewing in some factory, nights returning to an empty space that would never quite be home. Freedom, yes, but a lonely kind of freedom. The sun climbed higher, and Emma shifted to keep in the tree's shade. Buttercup grazed nearby, occasionally lifting her head to check on her charge. Such a simple thing, Emma thought, to be cared for without condition. The horse didn't know or care about her past, her father's debts, the circumstances of her marriage. She simply stood guard, patient and steady. Like Thomas in his way, offering books and space and time, never pushing, never demanding, just present, available, constant as these Texas hills. Emma stood, dusting off her skirts. She looked down the road toward Dust Hollow, then back toward the ranch. The choice, when she finally made it, came not from her head but from somewhere deeper. That stubborn flame inside her that had survived 17 years of hardship, that refused to be extinguished even when life tried its hardest to snuff it out. She mounted Buttercup again, more smoothly this time, and turned the horse's head. Not toward Dust Hollow. Not because she had nowhere else to go, not because Thomas offered comfort and safety, not because it was expected or proper or easy, but because when she pictured herself in 5 years, 10 years, 20, the woman she saw was strong, capable. She could ride and read and play music. She could run a household and manage accounts and hold her own in conversations about books and ideas. She could be a partner, not a possession. And that woman, the one she wanted to become, needed what the ranch could teach her, needed the space Thomas offered to grow into herself, needed Lucia's wisdom and the library's treasures, and yes, even the ghost of Clara to remind her that having wasn't the same as living. The ride back seemed shorter, Buttercup picking up her pace as they neared home. Home. There was that word again, settling more comfortably now. Thomas was where she'd left him, mending a fence near the stable. He looked up as she approached but didn't speak, just watched as she dismounted and led Buttercup to the water trough. The road to Dust Hollow looked long, Emma said finally. Most roads away look long when you're sitting still. She turned to face him fully. I chose to come back, not because I had to, because I wanted to. Something shifted in Thomas's face, a loosening of tension she hadn't realized he carried. I'm glad. But I need something to be different. I can't just drift through days, reading books and mending clothes. I need purpose, work, something that matters. Thomas set down his tools, giving her his full attention. What did you have in mind? Teach me to run a ranch, not just the household parts, really run it, the accounts, the cattle, the business of it. I want to understand how it all works. He looked surprised. That's not typical women's work. Neither was surviving my father. Neither was raising Mary when our mother died. I'm not typical. Thomas, I think you knew that when you offered me choices. A slow smile spread across his face. The first truly unguarded expression she'd seen from him. No, you're not typical. All right, Emma, we'll start tomorrow. Fair warning, it's hard work. Long days, difficult decisions. Plenty of failure before success. I'm not afraid of hard work. No, he said softly. I don't believe you are. They stood there in the afternoon sun. Two people who'd found themselves bound by circumstances neither had chosen. Now choosing something different. Not love, not yet, but partnership, possibility. A future that belonged to both of them equally. There's one more thing, Emma said. I want to write to Mary. Tell her I'm safe. Maybe bring her here for a visit, if that's acceptable. Of course, family is always welcome. Family. Another word that felt new in her mouth. But as Emma led Buttercup back to the stable, Thomas falling into step beside her, she thought maybe she was beginning to understand what it meant. Not just blood or law or obligation, but choice. The decision to stay, to build, to trust that tomorrow could be different from yesterday. She'd sat at that crossroads and chosen her path. Now all that remained was to walk it, one dusty step at a time, toward whatever waited at the journey's end. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, 3 months after Emma had chosen to stay at the crossroads. She recognized Mary's careful handwriting immediately, though the paper was crumpled and stained, as if it had been hidden and retrieved multiple times before sending. Emma's hands shook as she opened it in the privacy of her room, Thomas having brought it to her personally rather than leaving it with the usual mail. He'd seen something in her face, she supposed, and quietly withdrawn to give her space. Dearest Emma, it began. I hope this letter finds you well. I am writing in haste and in secret. Papa has arranged for me to marry Mr. Josiah Weatherby, who owns the saloon. He says I am old enough now, though I will not be 14 until spring. The wedding is set for next week. Papa owes him considerable money from gambling. I am trying to be brave like you taught me, but I am frightened. Mr. Weatherby looks at me in ways that make me want to hide. Please, if there is any help you can offer, I beg you to send word. Your loving sister, Mary. The paper slipped from Emma's numb fingers. 13 years old. Mary was 13 years old, still playing with cornhusk dolls when she thought no one was looking. The same age Emma had been when their mother died, when childhood ended and survival began. Emma found herself in the stable before she'd consciously decided to move, pulling on her riding gloves with trembling hands. Buttercup nickered in greeting, but Emma moved past her to Sovereign, Thomas's black stallion. She'd been riding for months now, had graduated to more spirited mounts under Thomas's careful tutelage. Whoa there! Jake, the stable hand, stepped forward. Mrs. Mercer, Sovereign's a handful even for experienced riders. Saddle him, Emma said, her voice strange and flat to her own ears. Now! Jake must have seen something in her face because he didn't argue further, though his movements were reluctant as he prepared the horse. Emma paced, letter clutched in her fist, mind racing through possibilities. She had some money saved from the household accounts Thomas had been teaching her to manage. Not much, but perhaps enough to buy off a small debt. Or she could plead with her father, though the thought made bile rise in her throat. Emma, Thomas's voice came from the stable entrance. Jake said you were... What's wrong? She thrust the letter at him wordlessly, watched his face darken as he read. Saw his jaw clench when he reached the part about Mary's age. 13, he said quietly. Christ almighty. I have to go, Emma said. I have to get her out of there. I don't care what it costs. I don't care what I have to do. We have to go, Thomas corrected. Jake, Saddle Buttercup as well, and send Miguel to town for Sheriff Morrison. Tell him to meet us at the Weatherby Saloon by noon." "You don't have to," Emma began. "Yes," Thomas said firmly. "I do. No man with any decency would stand by while a child is sold to pay gambling debts. And that's what this is. Emma, your father is selling a child." The word hit like a physical blow. Selling, just as he'd sold Emma. Except Mary was even younger, even more vulnerable. And Weatherby. Emma knew his reputation. The way he treated his saloon girls, the bruises they tried to hide with powder and paint. They rode hard toward Dust Hollow. Emma grateful for all those hours of practice that let her keep pace with Thomas. The familiar landmarks passed in a blur. The twisted oak where she'd once hidden from her father's rage. The creek where she'd taught Mary to catch minnows. The hill that overlooked their ramshackle home. "What's your plan?" Emma asked as they slowed the horses to rest them. "First, we get Mary somewhere safe. Then we deal with the legal matters. Sheriff Morrison's a good man. He won't stand for this either." "My father will fight. He'll say it's his right as her parent." "Then we'll fight harder," Thomas said simply. "I've got lawyers, Emma, good ones, and judges who owe me favors. Your sister's not getting married to any saloon owner." They reached Dust Hollow just before noon. Horses lathered with sweat. The town looked smaller than Emma remembered. Shabbier. Had it always been so diminished? Or had her world simply grown larger? The Weatherby Saloon squatted on Main Street like a cancerous growth. Paint peeling, windows grimy. Even at midday, Emma could hear rough laughter and clinking glasses from within. Her stomach churned at the thought of Mary in such a place. "Wait here," Thomas said, dismounting. "No." Emma slid from Buttercup's back. "She's my sister. I'm coming." He studied her face, then nodded. "Stay behind me, and if things turn ugly, you run. Promise me." Emma didn't promise. She couldn't. Not when Mary needed her. The saloon's interior was dim and thick with smoke. It took Emma's eyes a moment to adjust, to pick out the shapes of men hunched over drinks, the tired-looking women who served them. And there, her father at a corner table, papers spread before him, Weatherby beside him with one proprietary hand on Mary's shoulder. Mary looked so small in her faded dress, eyes downcast, hands folded in her lap like she was already practicing to be invisible. She glanced up as the doors swung shut, and her face transformed with desperate hope. "Emma." Well, Samuel Clayton slurred, raising his glass in mock toast. "The prodigal daughter returns. Come to see your sister's good fortune." "I've come to take Mary home," Emma said, stepping around Thomas despite his warning gesture. Weatherby's grip tightened on Mary's shoulder, making her wince. Now. Can't have that. We've got an agreement all signed and proper. Money's owed. And this here's the payment." "She's 13 years old," Thomas said, voice deadly quiet. "No agreement involving a child is proper or legal." "Who asked you?" Samuel struggled to his feet, swaying. "This is family business." "I'm her family too," Emma said, "and I won't let you do to her what you did to me." "You landed on your feet well enough," her father sneered. "Got yourself a rich husband. Fancy house. Mary here could do the same if she plays her cards right." "I run an honest establishment," Weatherby protested, though his eyes shifted nervously as Sheriff Morrison entered, star glinting on his vest. "Honest," Emma repeated flatly. "Tell me, Mr. Weatherby, what exactly did you plan for my 13-year-old sister in your honest establishment?" "Now see here." "No, you see here." Emma moved forward, placing herself between Weatherby and Mary. "You're not touching her. Not today. Not ever." Weatherby stood, face flushing. "Your father owes me $200. That debt don't just disappear because you've got delicate sensibilities." $200. Thomas pulled out his wallet, counting bills with a deliberate precision. "Here's $300. The extra 100 is for you to forget you ever heard the name Mary Clayton." The saloon went silent, except for the slap of bills on the scarred table. Weatherby's eyes fixed on the money, greed warring with pride on his face. "And the interest?" he asked slyly. "Man's got to make a living." "The interest," Sheriff Morrison said mildly, "is that I don't investigate your establishment for employing underage girls, because if I started looking real close at some of these young ladies you've got working here—" Weatherby snatched the money. "Take her then, but this don't settle all of Samuel's debts. Man's into me for more than just this." "Papa," Mary's voice was small, hopeful despite everything. "Can I really go with Emma?" Samuel wouldn't meet her eyes. "Get out of here, both of you. I don't want to see either of you again." Emma felt Mary's hand slip into hers, trembling but trusting. She squeezed gently, then looked at the man who'd terrorized her childhood. He seemed smaller now, diminished, just a drunk gambling away daughters he'd never valued. "Goodbye, Papa," she said quietly. "I hope someday you find whatever it is you're looking for at the bottom of those bottles." They left the saloon together, Emma, Thomas, Mary, and Sheriff Morrison, outside. Mary threw herself into Emma's arms, sobbing with relief and fear and the overwhelming emotion of rescue. "Shh," Emma murmured, holding her tight. "You're safe now. I've got you." "I was so scared," Mary whispered. "He kept looking at me, and Papa just laughed, and I thought... "I know, sweetling, I know. But you're coming home with us now. You'll have your own room and books to read and horses to ride. Would you like that?" Mary pulled back, eyes wide. "Really, I can stay with you?" "For as long as you want," Thomas said gently. "Your family, Miss Mary, family stays together." Sheriff Morrison cleared his throat. "I'll need to file some paperwork. Make this all legal-like. Transfer of guardianship. Given the circumstances. Shouldn't be any trouble, considering." "Thank you," Emma said, meaning it deeply. "For everything. Ma'am, some things ought not need thanking. Keeping children safe is just basic human decency." He tipped his hat. "I'll be in touch about the papers." As they prepared to leave, Mary riding double with Emma on the gentle Buttercup, Emma took one last look at Dust Hollow, the place that had shaped her through hardship and pain, that had tried to break her and failed. She felt no nostalgia, no regret, only a profound relief to be leaving it behind, this time taking with her the one person who'd made it bearable. "Emma," Mary asked as they rode out of town, is Mr. Mercer kind, truly kind?" Emma glanced at Thomas riding beside them, his face set in grim lines as he watched the road ahead, protecting them even now. "Yes," she said softly. "He's kind in ways that matter." "You'll see." They rode toward the Double M Ranch as the sun peeked overhead. Three people bound by choice rather than blood, by compassion rather than law. Emma held Mary secure in front of her, feeling her sister relax incrementally with each mile they put between themselves and Dust Hollow. She'd received the letter that morning. By evening, Mary would be safe in a warm bed, free from the threat of being bartered away for the price of whiskey and cards. It had happened so fast, yet Emma knew the real work was just beginning. Mary would need time to heal, to trust, to believe that her new life was real and lasting. But they had time now, all the time in the world. As the ranch came into view, Lucia already on the porch as if sensing their arrival, Emma felt that stubborn flame inside her burn brighter. She'd saved Mary. They'd saved Mary. And in doing so, perhaps they'd saved themselves a little too, from bitterness, from isolation, from the terrible weight of standing by while innocence was sold. "Welcome home, Mary," Emma whispered as they rode through the gates. "Welcome home." The confrontation came 2 weeks after Mary's rescue, on a day when storm clouds gathered like bruises on the horizon. Emma had been teaching Mary to make preserves in the kitchen when they heard the shouting from the yard. Her father's voice, slurred with drink, but sharp with rage. "I know you're in there. A man's got rights. You can't just steal what's mine." Emma's hand stilled on the jar she'd been sealing. Beside her, Mary went pale, instinctively shrinking back toward the pantry. The fear in her sister's eyes ignited something fierce and protective in Emma's chest. "Stay here with Lucia," Emma said quietly, already moving toward the door. "Emma, no." Mary caught her sleeve. "Please don't let him take me back." "Never," Emma promised, gently freeing herself. "You belong here now. I won't let anyone change that." She stepped out onto the porch to find a scene already unfolding. Her father stood in the dusty yard, swaying slightly, while Thomas faced him with crossed arms. Several ranch hands had paused in their work, watching warily. Sheriff Morrison was there too, having arrived just moments before, his timing either fortunate or purposeful. "There she is," Samuel pointed an accusing finger at Emma, the ungrateful girl who corrupted her sister against her own blood. "Go home, Papa," Emma said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "You have no business here." "No business. She's my daughter, mine to do with as I see fit." "She's a child," Thomas said, his quiet tone more menacing than any shout. "Not property to be bartered." Samuel spat in the dirt. "Rich men, thinking you can buy anything. First one daughter, now the other. What's your game?" "Mercer." "My game," Thomas said slowly, "is ensuring children aren't sold to pay their father's drinking debts." A crowd was gathering now, ranch hands abandoning their tasks, Lucia and several other women emerging from various buildings. Emma saw Mary peek through the kitchen window despite instructions to stay hidden. The whole ranch, it seemed, had come to witness this reckoning. "I've got rights," Samuel repeated, but his voice wavered as he took in the assembled crowd. "The law says—" "The law says," Sheriff Morrison interrupted, producing a document from his jacket, "that custody of Mary Clayton has been transferred to her sister, Mrs. Emma Mercer, on grounds of parental neglect and endangerment, signed by Judge Patterson himself." Samuel's face purpled. "You can't do that. She's my blood." "Blood." Emma stepped down from the porch, moving past Thomas despite his warning gesture. "Is that what you call it? Blood didn't stop you from raising your fists. Blood didn't stop you from trading me to clear your debts. Blood didn't stop you from trying to sell Mary to a man older than you." She stood before her father now, close enough to smell the whiskey on his breath, to see the broken veins in his nose. He'd seemed so large when she was young, so impossible to escape. Now he just looked pathetic, a small, bitter man who'd spent his life breaking things he should have protected. "You were fed, weren't you?" he blustered. "Had a roof over your heads. When you remembered, when you hadn't drunk away the money meant for food, when you weren't too deep in your cards to care if we ate at all." The crowd murmured, and Emma felt their support like a physical presence at her back. These people who'd taken her in, who'd watched her learn to ride and manage accounts and slowly unfurl from the frightened girl she'd been. "You don't know," Samuel's voice turned wheedling. "The pressure a man faces, trying to provide. Your mother's death broke me." "Mama died 5 years ago." Emma cut him off. "You've been broken far longer than that. Maybe you always were, but that ends here. You don't get to break Mary, too." Movement caught her eye. Mary slipping out despite orders, coming to stand beside Emma. Thomas moved to stop her, but Emma raised a hand. This was Mary's choice to make. "Papa," Mary said, voice trembling but determined. "I don't want to go back. I want to stay with Emma." Samuel's face contorted. "You too, both my girls, turning against me." "We're not against you," Mary said softly. "We're just for ourselves." The simple truth of it seemed to deflate him. Samuel looked around at the assembled crowd, at his daughters standing together, at the sheriff with his legal papers and Thomas with his implacable presence. This ain't over, he muttered, but the fight had gone out of him. Yes, Emma said firmly. It is. You made your choices. Papa, you chose whiskey over water, cards over care, your pride over our safety. Now we're making ours. For a moment, she thought he might strike her, saw his fist clench in the old familiar way. But Thomas stepped forward, not threatening, just present, and Samuel's hand dropped. Sheriff, Thomas said quietly. I believe Mr. Clayton was just leaving. Indeed, Morrison agreed. In fact, I'll escort him myself, make sure he gets home safe. As the sheriff led her father away, Emma heard him muttering about ungrateful daughters and stolen property, but his words had no power anymore. Scattered like dust on the wind, the crowd began to disperse, ranch hands returning to their duties with nods of approval toward Emma and Mary. Several of the women paused to squeeze Mary's shoulder or murmur words of support. You did good, Lucia said, embracing both sisters briefly. Standing up like that, your mama would be proud. When they were alone on the porch, Emma, Mary, and Thomas, the tension finally broke. Mary burst into tears, throwing her arms around Emma's waist. I was so scared he'd make me go back, she sobbed. Even with the papers, even with everyone here, I thought... Shh, Emma soothed, stroking her hair. You're safe. We're both safe. He can't hurt us anymore. Thomas cleared his throat. Mary, why don't you go help Lucia with dinner? I believe she mentioned something about teaching you to make empanadas. Mary brightened slightly, wiping her eyes. Really? Really, go on now. After she'd gone, Emma and Thomas stood in silence, watching the storm clouds build on the horizon. Thank you, Emma said finally, for standing with us, for making it clear he couldn't just... You don't need to thank me for basic decency, Thomas said, echoing his words from months ago. Though I have to say, the way you faced him down... He shook his head admiringly. You're stronger than you know. Emma Mercer. Emma Mercer. The name that had felt so foreign once now seemed to fit, earned through choice rather than circumstance. I didn't feel strong, she admitted. I felt terrified, but Mary needed me to be brave, so I was. That's what real strength is, being afraid and standing up anyway. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and the first fat drops of rain began to fall. They moved under the porch's shelter, standing side by side as the storm swept in. He might come back, Emma said quietly. Men like him, they don't give up easily when they think something's been taken from them. Let him try, Thomas said simply. This ranch, these people, we protect our own, and you and Mary are part of that now. Our own family, home, words that had once seemed meant for other people now wrapped around Emma like a warm blanket. I never thanked you properly, she said, for the money you paid Weatherby. I'll pay you back. Once I... You'll do no such thing. His voice was firm. That money bought something priceless, a child's safety. I'd pay it 10 times over. Emma turned to study his profile in the gray stormlight. This man who'd taken in a frightened bride, who'd given her space to choose her own path, who'd stood between her and harm without question or hesitation. Why? She asked softly. Why do you care so much? He was quiet for a long moment, rain drumming on the roof above them. Because I failed someone once, someone who needed me to see past my own assumptions to what she really needed. I can't fix that, but I can do better now. Clara, Emma thought but didn't say, the ghost that haunted them both in different ways. We all have our ghosts, she said instead. Maybe the best we can do is try to lay them to rest by living better. Wise words from someone so young. I'm not that young anymore, Emma said wryly. Feels like I've aged a decade in the past few months. Growth will do that. You're not the same girl who stood at that altar in her mother's dress. No, Emma agreed. I'm not... That girl was just trying to survive. Now I'm trying to live." The storm intensified, lightning illuminating the ranch in sharp relief. But Emma felt no fear, only a sense of rightness. She'd faced down her father, protected her sister, claimed her place in this new life. Whatever came next, she was ready for it. "Come on," Thomas said as the wind picked up. "Let's go see how Mary's managing with those empanadas. 10-1 she's got flour in her hair already." Emma laughed, surprising herself with how easy it felt. 20-1 Lucia's telling embarrassing stories about you as a boy. "That's a sucker's bet," Thomas grumbled, but he was smiling as they went inside together. The house was warm and full of the sounds of cooking, of Mary's giggles and Lucia's patient instructions, home sounds, family sounds. Emma paused in the doorway, watching her sister flour-dusted and happy, and felt that stubborn flame inside her burn steady and strong. She'd stood her ground today, faced the man who'd terrorized her childhood and found him smaller than her courage, protected what mattered, chosen her own path. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Running a ranch was hard work, raising a young sister harder still. But tonight, with the storm raging outside and her family safe within, Emma Mercer felt something she'd never expected to feel again: peace. The fire started just after midnight, 3 days after the confrontation with her father. Emma woke to the acrid smell of smoke and the sound of men shouting in the yard. She flew from bed, not bothering with a wrapper, and ran to the window. Orange flames licked at the eastern sky where the hay barn stood. "Fire!" someone bellowed. "All hands, fire in the hay barn!" Emma yanked on her boots and rushed downstairs, nearly colliding with Thomas in the hallway. His face was grim, shirt hastily pulled on. "Stay in the house," he ordered, already moving toward the door. "Like hell," Emma shot back, surprising them both with her language. "That's our winter feed burning." He paused for a heartbeat, then nodded. "Stay clear of the flames. Help organize the bucket brigade." Outside was chaos. Ranch hands stumbled from the bunkhouse, some still pulling on boots, all converging on the well. The hay barn was fully engulfed, flames reaching toward the stars. But the danger was spreading. Sparks carried on the wind toward the stable where 30 horses shifted nervously. "We need to move the horses," Jake shouted, his young face orange in the firelight. Emma didn't think, just acted. She ran for the stable, several hands behind her. Inside, horses whinnied and stamped, eyes rolling white with fear. Smoke was already seeping through the walls. "Open all the stalls," Emma commanded. "Drive them out into the far pasture." She went straight to Buttercup, who was trembling but trusted Emma's voice. "Easy, girl, easy. We're getting out of here." One by one, they freed the horses. Some bolted immediately. Others had to be coaxed or driven. Emma lost count of how many times she ran back inside, lungs burning, until finally Jake grabbed her arm. "That's all of them. Mrs. Mercer, the stable's catching." Sure enough, the wall nearest the hay barn had begun to smolder. Emma backed away, coughing, and found herself face to face with Thomas. "I told you to stay clear." He looked furious and terrified in equal measure. "And let the horses burn," Emma retorted. "We lost the hay, but we saved what matters." The bucket brigade had formed now. Men passing water hand to hand, dousing the stable walls and nearby buildings. Women from the household joined in. Even Mary, who should have been safe in bed but stood determinedly between Lucia and the cook, passing buckets with grim efficiency. They fought the fire until dawn, when finally the hay barn collapsed in on itself and the danger passed. Everyone stood exhausted, covered in soot and sweat, watching the embers glow in the pale morning light. "Well," Thomas said wearily, "there goes half our winter feed." "We'll make do," Emma said. "We can buy from the Hendersons, stretch what we have left." He looked at her with something like wonder. "We'll make do," he repeated. "When did you start thinking like a rancher?" Before Emma could answer, Sheriff Morrison rode up. taking in the scene with sharp eyes. "Hell of a thing," he said. "Fires are always a danger this time of year, dry as it's been." "This wasn't no accident." One of the hands, old Pete, spoke up. "I was on the watch. Saw a rider heading toward town just before the flames started." Morrison's expression hardened. "You get a look at him." Too dark, but he was riding hard, like the devil was chasing him. Emma felt a chill that had nothing to do with her sweat-soaked clothes. She caught Thomas's eye and saw her suspicion reflected there. "Sheriff," Thomas said carefully. "Might be worth checking if anyone saw Samuel Clayton out and about last night." "Might be," Morrison agreed. "Though proving anything," he shook his head. "You folks need anything immediate food, supplies." "We'll manage," Emma said firmly. "We always do." After the sheriff left, the ranch slowly returned to some semblance of normal. The horses were rounded up from where they'd scattered, the stable walls reinforced, the overwhelming task of cleanup begun. Emma worked alongside everyone else, ignoring Thomas's suggestions that she rest. It was late afternoon when she finally took a break, sitting on the porch steps with a cup of water. Mary found her there. "Do you think Papa really—" Mary couldn't finish the question. Emma pulled her sister close. "I don't know. Sweetling, maybe, or maybe it was just bad luck. I heard what old Pete said about the rider." "Rumors and suspicion aren't proof," Emma said gently. "We can't live our lives looking over our shoulders, seeing him in every shadow." "But what if he comes back? What if next time? Then we'll face it together, like we faced the fire. Did you see how everyone worked together? That's what families do. That's what we are now." Mary was quiet for a moment. "I helped with the buckets." "You did. I was proud of you." "I was scared the whole time, but everyone else was working so hard. I couldn't just hide." "Being scared and helping anyway? That's real courage," Emma said, echoing Thomas's words from days before. That evening, the household gathered for a late supper. Everyone was exhausted, but there was a sense of camaraderie born from shared trial. Thomas stood to address the room. "We lost the hay barn and half our winter feed," he said bluntly. "It'll be a lean season, but we saved every horse, every other building, and most importantly, every person. That's what matters." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. "I know some of you are thinking this might not have been an accident," he continued. "Maybe it wasn't, but we can't prove it, and we can't change it. What we can do is rebuild, stronger, better, together." He raised his glass of water. No one felt much like spirits after fighting fire all night. "To the double M, to family, to standing together against whatever comes." "To family," the room echoed, and Emma felt the words settle into her bones. Later, as the household settled for the night, Emma found herself walking the yard with Thomas. The smell of smoke still hung heavy, and the skeleton of the barn stood black against the stars. "We should post more watches," Emma said quietly. "At least until things calm down." "Already arranged. 2 men, overlapping rounds." He paused. "You think it was him?" It wasn't a question. Emma nodded slowly. "The timing, right after we faced him down, took away what he thought was his. Papa always did like his revenge served hot. Can't arrest a man on timing and temperament." "No, but we can be ready if he tries again." Emma squared her shoulders. "I won't let him drive us out. Thomas, this is our home, Mary's home. I'll fight for it." "I know you will. Saw that tonight when you ran into a stable full of panicked horses." His voice roughened. "Don't do that again. Emma, when I saw you going back in that last time, smoke pouring out." He stopped, jaw working. Emma touched his arm gently. "But I'm fine. We're all fine. That's what matters." "Clara used to say that," he said quietly. "When I'd worry about her riding alone or walking to town. I'm fine. Thomas, stop fussing." Until one day she wasn't fine, and all my belated concern couldn't bring her back. "I'm not Clara," Emma said firmly. "I'm not fragile or melancholy or whatever else she was. I'm Samuel Clayton's daughter, raised on hardship and stubbornness. It'll take more than fire to break me." "I'm beginning to believe that." He covered her hand with his, warm and calloused from work. "You were magnificent tonight, taking charge, saving the horses, keeping everyone focused. The hands are already telling stories." Emma flushed. "I just did what needed doing. Like a true rancher's wife." He squeezed her hand gently before releasing it. "We should try to sleep. Tomorrow we start rebuilding." As they walked back to the house, Emma felt something shift between them. Not love yet, perhaps, but partnership deepened by trial. They'd stood together against fire, whether natural or man-made. They'd protected what was theirs. In her room, Emma found Mary already asleep in the chair by the window, keeping watch despite exhaustion. Emma gently woke her, guided her to bed. "No one's coming tonight. Sweetling, rest now." "Promise," Mary murmured, already half asleep. "Promise, I'll keep watch." And she did, sitting by the window until dawn broke clear and smokeless. The barn skeleton stood stark in the morning light, a reminder of what they'd lost. But the stable stood strong, horses grazing peacefully in the pasture, and the house full of people who'd fought together through the night. They'd survived. More than that, they'd protected each other. If her father had thought to break them with fear and flame, he'd miscalculated badly. He'd only made them stronger, forged them into something harder to destroy than any building. Emma smiled grimly. Let him try again if he dared. He'd find more than frightened girls this time. He'd find a family ready to defend what they'd built. The Double M Ranch had been tested by fire and emerged scarred but standing. And Emma Mercer, who'd once been Emma Clayton, barefoot and desperate, stood with it, no longer just surviving but fighting for the life she'd chosen. Tomorrow they'd start rebuilding. But today, she thought as exhaustion finally claimed her, today they'd proven what they were made of, and it was stronger than any flame. The evening was unseasonably cool for September, a welcome respite from the scorching Texas summer. Emma sat on the porch, mending one of Thomas's work shirts while Mary practiced her letters at the small table Lucia had set out. It had been 2 weeks since the fire, and the ranch had settled into a watchful peace. Thomas emerged from the house with his guitar, something he'd taken to doing more often in the evenings. Instead of retreating to his study, he joined them on the porch, filling the air with melodies that seemed less mournful than before. "Play the one about the cowboy and the prairie flower," Mary requested, looking up from her slate. "That's a sad one," Thomas warned, settling into his chair. "All the best songs are sad," Mary said with the wisdom of a 13-year-old who'd seen too much. "But they're beautiful too." As Thomas began to play, Emma found herself watching his hands on the strings. Strong hands, capable hands, gentle despite their calluses. Hands that had never risen against her or Mary, that had offered only help and protection. "You're different lately," she said when the song ended. "Since the fire." Thomas considered this, absently tuning a string. "Am I?" "You smile more. You eat dinner with us every night instead of taking trays in your study. You're—" She searched for the right word. "Present. Maybe I finally remembered there's a difference between being in a house and being home," he said quietly. "Took me long enough to learn it." Mary had returned to her letters, tongue poking out in concentration. Emma lowered her voice. "Will you tell me about her, about Clara, not the story everyone knows? The real story." Thomas was quiet for so long, Emma thought he wouldn't answer. Then he set the guitar aside, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "I met Clara at a cattle auction in San Antonio. She was visiting relatives, fresh from Virginia, and I was young and foolish enough to think love at first sight meant knowing someone. She was beautiful, delicate features, soft hands, a laugh like church bells, everything I wasn't, everything this place wasn't. He paused, staring out at the darkening sky. I courted her properly, flowers, calling cards, chaperoned walks. Her family approved. I had money, land, prospects. We married in a big church wedding, and I brought her here thinking I was giving her a kingdom. But she didn't see it that way. No, she saw exile, empty spaces where she expected society, dust where she wanted gardens, cattle where she dreamed of concert halls. Thomas rubbed his face tiredly. I tried to make her happy. Had a piano shipped from Dallas, ordered books and fashion magazines from back east, took her to San Antonio every month, but it wasn't enough. This life wasn't enough.
That wasn't your fault,
Emma said softly. Wasn't it I never asked her what she wanted? Never considered she might be agreeing to marriage because that's what young women of good families did. I saw what I wanted to see. A beautiful woman who'd chosen me. I didn't see the cage I was building around her, bar by gilded bar. Emma set aside her mending. What happened at the end? She stopped eating, slowly at first, picking at meals, claiming no appetite, then barely touching food at all. She'd sit at that piano for hours, playing the same melancholy pieces over and over. I brought in doctors, but she just smiled and said she was fine, just tired. Always tired. His voice roughened. One morning, she didn't wake up. The doctor said her heart gave out, but I knew better. You can't live without nourishment, without hope. She starved herself to death rather than tell me how miserable she was. And I let it happen because I was too proud to see what was right in front of me. They sat in heavy silence. Mary had abandoned her letters, listening with wide eyes. Finally, Emma spoke. She made her choice, Thomas, just like you made yours, just like I made mine. The difference is she chose to leave, and I chose to stay. Why? The word came out raw. Why do you stay? You're young, smart, capable. You could have taken my offer, started fresh somewhere else. Emma looked at Mary, at the house that had become home, at the man who'd given her space to discover herself. Because here I can be more than I ever imagined. Because you see me as a person, not property. Because when I was drowning, you didn't just throw me a rope. You taught me to swim. Emma, he started, then stopped, shaking his head. And because, she continued, braver now. Somewhere between the books and the guitar lessons and fighting fires together, I started to care about you. Not from gratitude or obligation, but genuinely care. Mary made a small sound, gathering up her slate. I think I'll go help Lucia with the evening dishes, she announced with transparent subtlety. When they were alone, Thomas moved to sit beside Emma on the porch swing. I'm 28 years older than you. I can count, Emma said dryly. I'm set in my ways. I work too hard. I carry ghosts. We all carry ghosts. The difference is, you're trying to lay yours to rest instead of letting them rule you. Emma. Her name was a sigh on his lips. What are you asking for? Nothing you're not willing to give. But Thomas, I need you to understand. I'm not her. I'm not fragile or frightened of hard work. This land doesn't diminish me. It makes me stronger, and I'm choosing to be here, with you, for as long as you'll have me. He turned to face her fully, and in the dim light she could see the war in his expression, hope battling with fear, desire wrestling with duty. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. With Clara, I followed society's rules, played the proper suitor, but you deserve more than propriety. You deserve truth. Then tell me the truth. The truth is, I watch you with the horses and marvel at your courage. I see you teaching Mary and think what a wonderful mother you'll be someday. I hear you discussing ranch business and wonder how I ever managed without your insights. He took her hand, cradling it between both of his. The truth is, I'm falling in love with you, Emma Mercer, and it terrifies me. Emma's heart raced. but her voice stayed steady. Why? Because I failed before. Because you could have so much more than a widower with calloused hands and a ranch in the middle of nowhere. Because I'm afraid of trapping another songbird in a cage. Then it's a good thing I'm not a songbird, Emma said firmly. I'm a hawk. Thomas, I chose this sky to hunt in. I chose this land to nest on. And I choose you, if you'll have me. Not as the child bride you rescued or the girl you've been protecting, but as your partner, your equal, your wife in truth, not just in law. Thomas's hands tightened on hers. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met in a kiss that was nothing like the perfunctory brush at their wedding. This was choice and promise and the sealing of something that had been building through shared books and music, through lessons and laughter, through fire and family. When they parted, Emma saw tears in his eyes. Clara, she said gently, would want you to be happy, to live fully. That's how we honor the dead, by refusing to die with them. When did you become so wise? Somewhere between Jane Eyre and fighting barn fires, Emma said, winning a laugh from him. I love you, he said simply, not as a possession or a project, but as the remarkable woman you are. I love your strength and your stubbornness, your compassion for Mary, your way with the horses. I love that you see this land as opportunity, not exile. And I love you. Emma replied, for your gentleness hidden beneath strength, for the patience you showed a frightened girl, for the man who plays guitar when he thinks no one's listening and teaches children to read in his spare time. They sat together on the swing, hands entwined, watching the stars emerge one by one. Inside, Emma could hear Mary helping with dishes, Lucia's voice warm with affection. The sounds of home, of family, of a life chosen rather than endured. There's something else, Thomas said eventually. About Clara, a secret I've carried. Emma waited, sensing this was important. She left a note, hidden in the piano bench where she knew I'd find it. 3 words, I forgive you. Oh, Thomas. For years, I thought she meant she forgave me for failing her, but lately, watching you choose this life with such determination, I wonder if maybe she was forgiving me for something I hadn't done yet, for moving on, for finding happiness again. Emma squeezed his hand. Then honor her forgiveness. Choose to be happy. With you, with me, with Mary, with the family we're building here. She smiled. Though I should warn you, I expect to be a full partner. Ranch decisions, cattle drives, all of it. I didn't learn to read ledgers just to look pretty at dinner parties. Thomas laughed, a real laugh that seemed to shake something loose in him. I wouldn't expect anything less, though you do look pretty at dinner parties, the few we have. Flatterer, Emma accused, but she was smiling too. Emma, Mary's voice came from the doorway. Is everything... Are you both... Come here, sweetling, Emma called. Mary approached hesitantly, looking between them with hope and uncertainty. Things are going to be different now, Thomas told her gently. Better different, if that's all right with you. Mary's face lit up. Does this mean you're really truly married now, like a real family? We've been a real family since the day you arrived, Emma said. But yes, Thomas and I are choosing to be truly married, to be partners in everything. Mary threw herself at them both, arms barely spanning the space. I'm glad, she whispered fiercely. So glad. They held her between them, this girl they'd saved who had somehow saved them in return. Above them, the vast Texas sky spread endless and full of stars, holding space for all their ghosts and dreams alike. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Running a ranch always did. But tonight, on this porch where music had slowly replaced melancholy, Emma Mercer sat with her chosen family and felt the last of her old life's chains fall away. She was home. They all were. And that was the greatest choice of all. The change in their marriage was subtle but profound. Emma moved her belongings to Thomas's room, though she kept her former room as a study where she could work on the ranch accounts and continue her reading. They fell into new rhythms, waking together with the dawn, sharing breakfast before the day's work began, ending evenings side by side on the porch or in his study. It had been 3 weeks since that night on the porch, and Emma felt more herself than she ever had. She rode out with Thomas to check the herds, learning to read the land and the cattle, to spot signs of sickness or distress. The hands had accepted her authority naturally, tipping their hats and asking her opinion on matters that would have been unthinkable for a woman to weigh in on just months ago. This morning, however, brought a different kind of challenge. "There's something I need to tell you," Emma said over breakfast, pushing eggs around her plate nervously. Mary had already gone to help Lucia, leaving them alone in the dining room. Thomas looked up from the ledger he'd been reviewing. "What is it?" "I want to expand the household accounts, create a fund. For," Emma took a breath, "for women like I was, girls being forced into marriages they don't want, or trying to escape bad situations, a place they could come to, stay while they figure out their next steps." Thomas set down his coffee cup slowly. "That's a significant undertaking." "I know, and I know it could bring trouble. Men like my father, like Weatherby, they don't like losing what they think is theirs." Emma met his eyes steadily. "But I can't stop thinking about all the girls who don't have a Thomas Mercer to offer them choices, who are trapped with no way out. The townspeople might talk, say we're interfering in family matters, disrupting the natural order." "Let them talk," Emma said fiercely. "The natural order that says a 13-year-old can be sold to pay gambling debts, that order needs disrupting." Thomas was quiet for a long moment, and Emma braced for rejection. Then he smiled, that slow, warm smile she'd come to treasure. "How much do you need for the fund?" Emma blinked. "You're not going to argue." "Would it do any good if I did?" He reached across the table to take her hand. "Besides, you're right. We have the space, the resources. If we can help even one girl avoid—" He trailed off, but Emma heard the unspoken name. "Clara. I thought we could convert the old foreman's cottage. It's been empty since Jake moved to the bunkhouse. It's far enough from the main house for privacy, but close enough for protection." "You've thought this through." "I've done nothing but think about it. We could call it a domestic training program, teaching cooking and sewing and household management. Make it respectable on the surface, while actually giving them sanctuary and choices." Thomas squeezed her hand. "I married a revolutionary disguised as a rancher's wife." "Is that a yes?" "That's a yes. Draw up a budget. We'll make it happen." Emma felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. This is your project, your vision. I'm just supporting my wife's endeavors." His eyes twinkled. "Though I reserve the right to increase security if angry fathers start showing up." They were interrupted by rapid hoofbeats in the yard. Through the window, Emma saw Billy Martinez racing up, his young face flushed with urgency. Thomas was already moving to the door. "What is it, Billy?" "Senor Mercer, there's a girl on the road. She collapsed near the eastern gate. Miguel found her when he was checking fences." Emma grabbed her shawl. "Bring her to the house." "Senora, she's in a bad way. Bruises and—" "Bring her to the house," Emma repeated firmly. "Lucia and I will tend to her." Within minutes, Miguel carried in a slip of a girl, maybe 16, with tangled red hair and a face mottled with fading bruises. Her dress was torn and dusty, feet bare and bleeding. She was conscious but barely, green eyes unfocused with exhaustion. "Put her in the blue room," Emma directed, already moving into caretaker mode. "Lucia, we need hot water and clean cloths. Mary, fetch my medicine box." As they settled the girl into bed, she grabbed Emma's wrist with surprising strength. "Please," she whispered, "don't let him find me." "Who?" Emma asked gently.
Who are you running from?
My husband, Jonathan Brewster, The girl's voice broke. Emma's jaw tightened. She knew the Brewsters. Wealthy family from 2 towns over. Owned several businesses. Jonathan was their eldest son, known for his temper and his drinking. You're safe here, Emma promised. No one will hurt you. What's your name? Rose Brewster. But I was Rose O'Brien before. All right, Rose O'Brien. You rest now. We'll talk more when you're stronger. As Emma and Lucia tended to Rose's injuries, rope burns on her wrists, bruises in various stages of healing, cuts on her feet from running barefoot, Emma felt her resolve harden. This was why she needed the sanctuary fund. This was why it mattered. Thomas appeared in the doorway. How is she? Surviving, Emma said grimly, as we do. Brewster's already sent riders out looking for her. They stopped at the Henderson place, asking questions. And Henderson told them he hadn't seen her. Thomas's expression was dark. But Brewster's not the type to give up easy. He'll come here eventually. Let him come, Emma said, echoing her words from weeks before. She's under our protection now. Rose stirred, whimpering in her sleep. Emma smoothed the girl's hair back, remembering her own fear, her own desperation. I'll post extra men, Thomas said quietly, and send word to Sheriff Morrison. He should know what's happening. Will he help? Morrison's a good man, but the law. Thomas shrugged helplessly. A wife is her husband's property. Legally speaking, running away isn't protected. Then we'll protect her ourselves. Over the next 2 days, Rose slowly regained strength. She was skittish as a wild colt, flinching at sudden movements, but she gravitated toward Emma with desperate trust, bit by bit. Her story emerged, a marriage at 15 to clear her father's debts to the Brewster family, escalating violence when she couldn't produce an heir quickly enough, the final night when she'd feared he would kill her. I waited until he passed out drunk, Rose told Emma, clutching a cup of tea with shaking hands. Took what coins I could find and ran. I didn't even know where I was going. I just knew I had to get away. You did the right thing, Emma assured her. The brave thing. Brave, Rose laughed bitterly. I'm terrified every moment. I keep thinking I hear his voice, see his shadow. Fear and bravery aren't opposites, Mary said from the doorway. She'd been helping tend to Rose, drawn to another girl who'd needed rescue. They go together, like Emma says. Being brave means doing what's right even when you're scared. Rose looked between the sisters. You seem so strong, both of you, like nothing could break you. Emma and Mary exchanged glances. We've had practice, Emma said simply. And each other. You're not alone anymore. Rose, remember that. The confrontation came the next afternoon. Emma was teaching Rose basic accounting, giving her skills she could use to support herself, when they heard horses approaching. Many horses. Thomas met them in the yard, flanked by his men. Emma watched from the window as Jonathan Brewster dismounted, his handsome face twisted with fury. I know she's here. Mercer, hand over my wife. I don't know what you're talking about, Thomas replied calmly. Don't lie to me. She was seen heading this direction. You're harboring a runaway wife. I'm standing on my own property, talking to an unwelcome visitor who's making accusations without proof. Thomas corrected. I suggest you move along. Brewster stepped forward aggressively. I'll have the law on you. Please do. I'm sure Sheriff Morrison would be interested in discussing those marks on your wife's body. The ones that look suspiciously like someone tied her up. Beat her. The kind of marks that might make a judge reconsider the sanctity of your marriage vows. You can't prove anything. Can't I? Thomas smiled coldly. I have the best lawyers in Texas. You want to test that? Emma made a decision. Against Lucia's protests, she walked out onto the porch, head high. Mr. Brewster, she called. I believe you're looking for your wife. Emma, Thomas warned, but she continued down the steps. Yes, Brewster said eagerly. Rose, bring her out immediately. I'm afraid I can't do that. Emma stood beside Thomas, drawing strength from his presence. You see, Rose O'Brien has accepted a position in our household. She's under my protection now. Rose Brewster, he snarled. My wife, mine by law and God's witness. God witnesses many things, Emma said quietly, including men who break their marriage vows through violence, including young girls sold to pay debts, including the bruises you left on her body. You have no right. I have every right. This is my home, my land, my household, and I say Rose O'Brien stays. Brewster's hand moved toward his gun, but stopped as several clicks indicated Thomas's men had drawn their rifles. Think very carefully about your next move, Thomas said softly. You're outnumbered and outgunned. More importantly, you're in the wrong. Go home. Brewster, find yourself another wife if you must, but Rose is done with you. For a moment, violence hung in the air like smoke. Then Brewster spat in the dirt. This isn't over, he promised. I'll be back with the law. We'll be here, Emma replied steadily. As Brewster and his men rode off, Emma felt her knees go weak. Thomas caught her arm, steadying her. That was either very brave or very foolish, he murmured. Both, probably, but I couldn't let her face him alone. I couldn't let another girl think she had no choice. From the window, Rose watched with tears streaming down her face. When Emma came back inside, she fell to her knees. Thank you. I don't know how to repay. Stand up, Emma said gently, raising her. We don't kneel here. We stand together. And as for repayment, you'll help the next girl who needs it. That's how we change things, one rescue at a time. That evening, as they gathered for dinner, Thomas, Emma, Mary, Lucia, and Rose, Emma looked around the table and saw the beginnings of something larger than a family, a network, a quiet revolution. 2 choices, she said, raising her glass, and to those brave enough to make them. 2 choices, they echoed. And in that moment, Emma knew that the Sanctuary Fund would be more than just money. It would be hope. It would be proof that there were still people willing to stand between the vulnerable and those who would harm them. The Double M Ranch had always been a place of second chances. Now it would be something more, a lighthouse for those lost in storms of others' making, guiding them toward shores of their own choosing. And Emma Mercer, who had once been a frightened girl in a borrowed dress, would make sure that light never went out. Spring had come to the Double M Ranch, painting the hills with wildflowers and filling the air with the scent of new grass. Emma stood in what had once been the old foreman's cottage, now transformed into a welcoming space with 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, and a sitting room where young women could learn skills while planning their futures. Rose O'Brien had been their first resident, but not their last. Word had spread quietly through the network of household workers, seamstresses, and washerwomen. There was a place where desperate women could find sanctuary. In the 6 months since Rose arrived, they'd sheltered 4 more girls, helping them either reconcile safely with their families or start new lives elsewhere. The books balance perfectly, Rose announced proudly. Showing Emma the ledger, she'd taken to accounting with natural aptitude. And Thomas had already offered her a permanent position managing the ranch's household accounts. You've learned quickly, Emma praised. Mr. Morrison at the bank mentioned they might need a clerk soon. The pay is good, and they'd provide lodging above the office. Rose's face lit up, then shadowed. But would they hire a runaway wife? They'd hire Rose O'Brien, a skilled accountant with excellent references from the Double M Ranch. Emma corrected gently. Your past is yours to share or keep private. Through the window, Emma saw Thomas approaching with a woman she recognized, Mrs. Adelaide Winters. the minister's wife and one of the town's most influential voices.
Emma's stomach tightened. They'd been expecting this visit. Mrs. Winters.
Emma greeted her at the door. "Please, come in." Adelaide Winters was a formidable woman in her 50s, gray hair severely pinned, sharp eyes that missed nothing. She surveyed the cottage with obvious curiosity. "Mrs. Mercer, I've come to see for myself what exactly you're doing here."
"Would you like some tea?"
Emma offered, gesturing to the sitting room where two young women were practicing embroidery, useful work that could earn money while looking appropriately domestic.
"Thank you."
Adelaide settled herself primly.
"You must know there's been talk."
"There's always talk," Emma replied calmly, pouring tea. "About weather, cattle prices, and yes, about our domestic training program." "Is that what you call it?" Adelaide's tone was dry. "I hear you're harboring runaway wives, encouraging young women to abandon their sacred duties."
"I'm teaching young women skills to support themselves," Emma said. "Accounting, sewing, cooking, household management. If some of them happen to be escaping situations where they feared for their lives, should I turn them away?"
Adelaide studied her over the teacup.
"You're young yourself, Mrs. Mercer."
"Perhaps you don't understand the importance of maintaining social order." "With respect, Mrs. Winters, I understand all too well. I was 17 when my father sold me to clear his gambling debts." Adelaide's eyes widened slightly.
"Thomas Mercer bought you?"
"Thomas Mercer married me in a legal ceremony. Yes, but he also gave me choices, respect, and the chance to become who I am now." Emma leaned forward. "Not all young women are so fortunate in their husbands. The Bible says wives should submit to their husbands. The Bible also says husbands should love their wives as Christ loved the church. Tell me, Mrs. Winters, does Christ show love through fists and fear?" Adelaide set down her teacup with a sharp click. "You're playing a dangerous game, young woman."
"No," Emma said firmly. "I'm offering what I wish someone had offered me, a chance. These girls aren't abandoning sacred duties. They're escaping men who abandoned their sacred vows the first time they raised a hand in anger." They sat in tense silence. Then Adelaide surprised her. "My sister," she said quietly, "married at 16 to a man who seemed charming. By 20, she was dead. He said she fell down the stairs. We all knew better, but what could we do? A wife belongs to her husband." "She should have belonged to herself first," Emma said softly.
Adelaide stood abruptly.
"I should go."
"Mrs. Winters," Emma called as she reached the door. "Your women's church auxiliary does such good work. We could use teachers for our reading classes. These young women are eager to better themselves." Adelaide paused, hand on the doorframe.
"I'll consider it,"
she said finally.
"Good day, Mrs. Mercer."
After she left, Thomas appeared in the doorway. "How did it go?"
"Better than expected. I think she didn't threaten to have us shut down. At least..."
"That's because what we're doing isn't illegal. Unconventional, perhaps, but not illegal." He pulled her into his arms. "I'm proud of you. You handled that with more grace than I would have."
"You would have been fine,"
Emma said, but she leaned into his embrace. These moments of quiet affection had become precious to her. Proof that marriage could be partnership and tenderness rather than ownership and fear. A commotion in the yard drew their attention. Mary came running, face flushed with excitement. "Emma, there's a letter from that girl in Austin, the one who left last month. She got the job at the dress shop." Emma felt a surge of satisfaction. Another success story. Another young woman building a life of her own choosing. That evening, they held their weekly dinner at the main house where all the residents of the sanctuary were welcome. The table was full. Emma, Thomas, Mary, Lucia, Rose, two new arrivals named Catherine and Dolly, and even some of the ranch hands who'd taken to protective big brother roles with the young women. "I have an announcement," Thomas said as they finished dessert. Judge Patterson has agreed to review Rose's case. Given the documented evidence of mistreatment and abandonment of marital duties on Jonathan Brewster's part, he's willing to consider granting an annulment. Rose gasped, hand flying to her mouth. Truly? Truly, you'll need to testify, which won't be easy. But Emma and I will be there with you, and the judge is a fair man. An annulment, Rose whispered, as if it never happened, as if I could start clean. You've already started clean, Emma reminded her. This just makes it official. Later that night, Emma and Thomas walked through their expanded domain. The sanctuary cottage glowed with lamplight, voices drifting through open windows as the young women talked and laughed, sounds of healing, of hope. We've built something good here, Thomas said quietly. We've built something necessary, Emma corrected. Though sometimes I wonder if it's enough. For every girl we help, how many others are trapped with no way out? You can't save everyone, Emma. No, but I can save some. We can save some. She looked up at him. Do you ever regret it, the complications, the threats, the constant vigilance? Do you regret taking in Mary? Never. Then you have your answer. He kissed her forehead. Though I do have one regret. What's that? We never had a proper wedding. The first one was a business transaction. I'd like to marry you again. Emma Mercer. Properly this time. With you in a dress that fits and flowers in your hair and the whole town watching us choose each other freely. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. Thomas Mercer, are you proposing to your own wife? I'm proposing to the woman I love. The woman who turned a marriage of desperation into a partnership of equals. The woman who sees a ranch not just as land and cattle, but as a place where lives can be rebuilt. He took her hands. What do you say? Will you marry me again? Yes. Emma laughed through her tears. Yes, I'll marry you again, as many times as you like. They stood together under the vast Texas sky. No longer the desperate girl and guilty widower who'd entered a bargain 9 months ago. They were partners now, in every sense. Running a ranch, sheltering the vulnerable, building a different kind of family based on choice rather than chance. June, Thomas suggested. When the roses are blooming. June, Emma agreed. And Thomas, this time, I want Mary as my maid of honor and Rose as a bridesmaid. Our family, celebrating our choice. Perfect, he said, pulling her close. Absolutely perfect. As they walked back to the house, Emma thought about the journey that had brought them here. From a terrified girl in an ill-fitting wedding dress to a woman who faced down angry husbands and social censure alike. From a marriage born of debt to a love chosen freely. From isolation to community. The Double M Ranch had become more than either of them had imagined. Not just a home, but a haven. Not just a business, but a mission. And at the heart of it stood two people who'd learned that the strongest bonds were those freely chosen. That true love meant not ownership, but partnership. And that sometimes the greatest gift you could give someone was simply the chance to choose their own path. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new girls seeking sanctuary, new battles to fight. But tonight, under stars that had witnessed so much transformation, Emma Mercer stood with her chosen husband and knew that every difficult step had been worth it to reach this moment of perfect, imperfect, freely chosen joy. The end. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where in the world you are listening from, so please leave a comment below and share your thoughts about Emma and Thomas's journey. If you enjoyed this tale of courage, choice, and love in the Old West, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850 and hit the like button. And if you really want to help more people discover these stories of strong women and good men in the frontier days, please hit that hype button to boost this video. Your support means the world to me and helps me bring you more authentic Western tales. Until next time, partners.